I wanted first and foremost to thank Alexander for this very kind presentation. And of course, first and foremost, to thank Ambassador Ronald Lauder and to congratulate him for his re-election. I would like to say that I'm really deeply grateful for this invitation to speak today about UNESCO's role in countering anti-Semitism and preserving the legacy of the Holocaust. I remember the decisive participation of Mr. Lauder, Ambassador Lauder, in UNESCO's special event on the prevention of violent extremism at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York last September, where he made a deeply moving tribute to the great Elie Wiesel, and also spoke about UNESCO's role in combating anti-Semitism. And my gratitude goes also to the Executive Vice President, Mr. Singer, for the launch of the Education Without Border exhibition at UNESCO headquarters, side by side with Israel last April, and also for his commitment to developing cooperation with us. And of course, my gratitude for his very kind words that he said just an hour ago about my contribution to this process. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we stand once again together, united around shared values, and I'm deeply moved to be here on the occasion of Yom HaShoah. Yom HaShoah sends us back to the founding moments of UNESCO, which was created in response to the Second World War, in response to the Holocaust, and to all forms of racism and anti-Semitism, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I place the fight against xenophobia, racism, and anti-Semitism at the heart of UNESCO's action for peace. The role, I would say the core role, of the United Nations is unique. We act on mentalities, we act through the minds of women and men, as it is in our constitution, UNESCO's constitution, through education, culture, and knowledge, to build a climate for dialogue, for human rights, and for peace. I insist on this approach because I believe the ethical and political commitment against anti-Semitism and intolerance today must be founded on an intellectual effort to understand the roots of hatred and to diffuse the discourse that exploits ignorance. This, I believe, is UNESCO's role. I believe knowledge is a tool for peace. I believe culture is our strongest weapon against hatred. This is why UNESCO is the only United Nations agency to run a dedicated global program to teach the history of the Holocaust as a lever against anti-Semitism today that I developed these last 8 years during my tenure as UNESCO's Director General. This is why I'm convinced education, culture, and knowledge have become core security issues in the world today to combat denial and to combat violent extremism built on distortions of faith or history. This work has never been so important, nor, I would say, so difficult. Anti-Semitism has been rising in the past 2 decades. We see it in Europe, where terrorist attacks have targeted Jews in Toulouse, in Brussels, in Paris, in Copenhagen. We see it in regions of the world where there are no more Jewish communities. They have been persecuted, forced to flee. Hatred of Jews is ancient, and it has evolved over centuries, adopting new masks, learning how to shelter behind doublespeak, even behind freedom of expression. There are religious, political, social, and racial forms of anti-Semitism. And there is also, this must be very clear, a new anti-Semitism today, expressed in the form of a demonization of Israel through the hateful and systematic criticism of a country and seeking to delegitimize its very existence. And I would like to join also my thoughts and my commitment to the Secretary General's Antonio Guterres' strong words expressed yesterday evening. This is why the teaching of the history of the Holocaust remains a foundation in the struggle against anti-Semitism today. To know the past, but above all, to teach the mechanisms of escalating violence, how prejudice may lead to insults, insults to discrimination, discrimination to murder. UNESCO teaches about the Holocaust as a starting point to teach about other forms of mass atrocities, including the genocide of Tutsi in Rwanda, against the Yazidis in Iraq, and to help prevent new genocides. I will never forget the wisdom of our dear friend Samuel Pizar, Auschwitz survivor, UNESCO honorary ambassador for teaching of Holocaust, who said, "I speak not only to mourn the dead, but to warn the living." In this spirit, I nominated last year Serge and Beate Klarsfeld as UNESCO honorary ambassadors and special envoys for Holocaust education and the prevention of genocide. A key aspect of this work is to fight against the banalization of anti-Semitic discourse and hate speech. Anti-Semitic violence, ladies and gentlemen, is never an isolated act. It builds on public discourses. It is encouraged by perverse rhetoric stigmatizing minorities, refugees, foreigners, or simply by distorting Jewish history. It is against this discourse that we must fight. And we are carrying out this educational work on all continents to help teachers better address this difficult topic. We see more and more, especially in Europe, attempts to deny or to distort the history of the Holocaust and minimize the responsibility of local authorities alongside Nazi Germany, to see unacceptable prejudices become commonplace again. Some political parties even promote it. This clearly is a regeneration of traditional nationalistic anti-Semitism. It seeks to revisit the history of the war, whitewashing responsibility in the crimes perpetrated, expunging national histories from their Jewish dimension. These discourses must be countered, and this, I believe, is our UNESCO's role. Against those who distort history, UNESCO works to tell the truth about Jewish history, to protect World Heritage Sites in Israel, to share the wealth of Jewish culture among all other cultures, as we did with B'nai B'rith during our symposium on the permanence of Yiddish in 2012 and the Judeo-Spanish paths and Mediterranean in 2014, as we do in cooperation with the Simone Wiesenthal Center since 2015 with our traveling exhibition on 3,500 years of relations between the Jewish people and the Holy Land, which already has traveled around the world, to the Knesset in Israel, to the US Congress, the Vatican, to Buenos Aires, London, and Baku, and it will continue its journey. Against Holocaust denial and relativization, which fuels anti-Semitism today, to teach about the Holocaust. And over the last 5 years, UNESCO has organized countless workshops and conferences in different parts in the world, working with the leading universities on Holocaust education and genocide prevention, creating UNESCO chairs here in the United States, at the Rutgers University, the University of Southern California, Shoah Foundation, at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, Poland, and last year, with the French President François Hollande, we opened a new chair on citizenship education and convergence of memories at the Camp des Milles, a former concentration camp in southern France. Today, I am pleased to announce another publication of UNESCO. We started a couple of years ago with Why Teach About the Holocaust? We moved then with another important publication, The International Status of Education About Holocaust, a global mapping of textbooks and curricula for the first time done ever with the Georg Eckert Institute. And just a publication that we did last week, the first ever. It is a policy guide, Education About the Holocaust and Preventing Genocide. I think this is an extremely important work that are doing for teachers, for policymakers, for curriculum developers, and also for the wider civil society. The last guide is the first step of a series of projects conducted in partnership with United States Holocaust Memorial Museum with the support of the Canadian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I am very grateful, express my deep gratitude to Minister Christina Friedland, who will be joining us in a while. I see, ladies and gentlemen, this as a direct contribution by UNESCO to help strengthen policies and make a difference not just in one region, but at a global level. UNESCO is working equally to ensure that places of remembrance are preserved and respected. We are indeed about leveraging the power of ideas, but also very much about protecting, in a very concrete manner, places and sites of historical significance as World Heritage Sites, sites of memories. It is in this spirit that the German Nazi concentration and extermination camp of Auschwitz-Birkenau was inscribed on UNESCO's World Heritage List in 1979. And we work with all countries to ensure the history of this site is taught to all. Last January, the Auschwitz Museum opened an exceptional exhibition of personal objects of victims lost for decades, shown to the public for the first time in Paris at our headquarters. UNESCO's Memory of the World Register, which recognizes and protects the most important archives of humanity's shared documentary heritage, now also includes the Ringelblum archives of the Warsaw Ghetto, Anne Frank's diary, the archives of the International Tracing Service of Bad Arolsen, and the pages of testimony of Yad Vashem. When people say the Shoah is a myth, when negationists argue that there were no gas chambers in Auschwitz, or that 6 million Jews is an exaggerated number, we need to equip young people with these documents and stories as references to respond. I have heard many of the stories of Holocaust survivors during our commemoration on the 27th of January of the International Holocaust Day. I still hear the voice of Shlomo Venezia, who spoke about his experience in the Zorin commandos in front of a silent room at UNESCO. I remember the world premiere of the film of Claude Lanzmann, Shoah, subtitled in Farsi, in Turkish, and in Arabic by the Aladdin Project, a privileged partner of UNESCO in this work, and broadcast from UNESCO by satellite to Iran already in 2011. Exactly 6 years ago, ladies and gentlemen, I led, with the mayor of Paris, Bertrand Delanoë, a delegation of 150 personalities in January 2011, where there were many rabbis, imams, bishops, organized by the Aladdin Project when we visited Auschwitz-Birkenau camp. And over the last 10 years, we have welcomed the greatest intellectuals to transmit and educate. Yehuda Bauer, Stephen Katz, Dina Porat, and Yad Vashem chief historian, and many, many others. On all these fronts, UNESCO has played its part and laid the foundations for an irreversible commitment to the knowledge of history. Without the determination and authority of UNESCO, I believe, none of these projects would have been possible. I have to admit, this is not always an easy task. There are setbacks and hurdles. But in my view, in my firm opinion, this is not only necessary, but it is non-negotiable. And we need the support of all of you to ensure these documents and stories are told in schools, in textbooks across the world. Today, against the new forms of anti-Semitism, we must constantly reinvent our tools. We work with the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, with which we organized a conference in December on the prevention of anti-Semitism through education, culture, and communication, in the presence and a very impressive participation of the French Senator Robert Badinter, one of the staunchest figures against anti-Semitism, the fight against anti-Semitism and for human rights. With the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, we will produce this year new tool for educators, as we have done to deny anti-Muslim racism in schools. For all this, we need the full mobilization of all our partners and friends to really make a difference. And this is why our cooperation with Israel on these issues, as well as on scientific research, new technologies, and much, much more, is vital. We have built a strong network of partners in Israel with the Golda Meir Institute, which I visited already 6 years ago, with the Weizmann Institute of Science, and Shimon Peres Institute for Peace, with whom we just signed an agreement, among others. And this, I'm committed, will grow further. So, ladies and gentlemen, I consider the work of UNESCO against anti-Semitism as a core part of our wider efforts to build peace and prevent violent extremism. I consider hard power alone is not enough to prevent threats that draw or exclusive visions of the world and builds on false interpretations of faith. We need the soft power of education, culture, communication also, to win the battles of ideas, particularly in the minds of young people. When the resolution on the protection of heritage, the historic resolution 2347, was adopted in March by the Security Council, and I was invited to brief, I quoted the German poet Heinrich Heine, who once said, "Everywhere, when people start burning books and culture, they end up burning other people." And history shows this to be true. I believe that when we unite for heritage, if we protect books and culture and knowledge and ideas, we also protect the people. We also strengthen the defenses of peace. And this is the salience of UNESCO today. It is in this spirit that we cooperate with the European Union, with other partners to bolster education in emergency situations. This underpins also our efforts to craft education guidelines for human rights education, and our leadership in the first ever high-level conference on education to prevent and counter violent extremism that we organized with the United States in 2015. And this also underpins the normative tools that we develop, Teacher's Guide on the Prevention of Violent Extremism, and our recently published guide for policymakers on the same subject. And in the digital world, we organized the first international conference on youth and the internet, fighting radicalization, and held the second one in Quebec, Canada, with the support of Quebec and the government of Canada. And I did mention this historic resolution 2347, adopted on the 24th March, against cultural destruction and cultural cleansing in the Middle East, and its link to fighting extremism and terrorist financing. This historic decision, with the first ever G7 meeting on culture, organized a week later, attest to a new awakening about the power of protecting culture and heritage for peace and security. Violent extremists know the power of culture to unite, and this is why they target and destroy heritage. This is why they destroyed the fabled shrine of the prophet Jonas, the Abi Yunus in Mosul, in Iraq, revered by Jews, Christians, and Muslims. In response, the Security Council members, for the first time, anonymously made the protection of culture a key security issue, fighting against illicit trafficking of antiquities, denouncing the heritage, destruction of heritage as a war crime and a new tactic of war. This includes all permanent members, but also the 57 co-sponsor countries, including Israel, Lebanon, Morocco, Iraq, all united for heritage, and I would like to thank them all. This global effort, spearheaded by France and Italy, I believe is also the result of years of advocacy and work by UNESCO. We need to show everybody that dialogue among cultures actually exists, as has always existed. This is not a dream, but a reality embedded in the stones of our world heritage. There is hardly a stronger symbol, ladies and gentlemen, than the old city of Jerusalem and its walls, which is, of course, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, to share this universal message of hope and unity. And if you allow me, I would like to conclude with the following words. Nowhere in the world more than in Jerusalem do Jewish, Christian, and Muslim traditions share space and interweave to the point that they support each other. These cultural and spiritual traditions build on sacred texts and references known by all. They are an intrinsic part of these identities and history of peoples, including of the Jewish people. In the Torah, Jerusalem is the capital of King David, where Solomon built the temple and placed the Ark of the Covenant. In the Bible, Jerusalem is the city of the Passion and resurrection of Jesus Christ. In the Quran, Jerusalem is the third holiest site in Islam, where Muhammad arrived after his night journey from Al-Haram Mosque in Mecca to Al-Aqsa. In the microcosm of humanity's spiritual diversity, different peoples worship the same places, sometimes under different names. The recognition, use of, and respect for these names is paramount. The Al-Aqsa Mosque, Al-Haram al-Sharif, the sacred shrine of Muslims, is also the Har HaBait, or Temple Mount, the holiest place in Judaism, whose western wall is revered by millions across the world, just a few steps away from the Saint Sepulchre and the Mount of Olives, holy to the Christians. The outstanding universal value of Jerusalem and the reason why it was inscribed on the World Heritage List lies in this synthesis, which is an appeal for dialogue, not for confrontation. To deny, conceal, or erase any of the Jewish, Christian, or Muslim traditions runs counter to the reasons that justified its inscription on the UNESCO World Heritage List. And I have said it many times, and I will not be tired to repeat, because I think this goes to the core of UNESCO's values. Jerusalem puts us in front of a radical choice. We can try to ignore these interactions, distort our heritage in endless disputes about what belongs to who, to this culture or another, and cut our heritage in pieces. Or we can make another choice, recognize each other's cultures, and recognize our symbols of our faith, and decide to unite for heritage, to harness the power of heritage to build peace and to better understand our common destiny. I believe, and this is how I understand my responsibilities as Director General of UNESCO, it is to strengthen this cultural and religious coexistence, and it is my absolute daily determination as Director General to work with all member states, all partners in this spirit. As I said, it is not always easy, but there is no other way. And I believe, to echo to Heinrich Heine, that indeed, when people unite around culture, around the shared knowledge of history, they protect each other. And this is how we can combat anti-Semitism and honor the memory of the victims of Shoah. Just a few days before she was deported to the death camp, Hélène Baird, a French young Jewish woman, wrote in her journal, "It gives me pleasure to think that if I'm deported, my friend André will have kept this journal, which is what is most precious to me. For now, I do not care for anything else that is material. We must be safeguarded in one's soul and one's memory. Protecting this soul and memory, I believe, is UNESCO's role. This is my determination as Director General, and I will continue to do so." Thank you very much for your attention.